This series was made possible thanks to the generosity of these patrons and from the likes and watch time of viewers like you. Thank you for your support.
Read the disclaimers, and please use common sense.
Where to begin? I feel as though I should start this episode with one of my classic 5-minute long spiels explaining where I've been and why it's taken me this long to make another goddamn video. But really, the reason it's taking so long for me to make these videos is very simple to explain. I've been overthinking this crap like a moron. So salutations, denizens of the internet. I'm Firebite27, and let us commence our analysis of Transformers Buzzworthy Bumblebee. Terrorsaur? The f*** is he doing here? Now, before we get to the meat and potatoes of this review, we've got a small bit of context to cover, mostly just pertaining to my history with the mold. For those who don't already know, this figure is a retool or heavily modified version of the Kingdom Airazor mold, which I've already covered in a review. And while on its own terms, this mold is borderline, and while on its own terms, it's a borderline perfect figure that has had people who despise Beast Wars renouncing their vows to never buy a figure from it, I've got a little confession to make about this figure. I don't like it.
Get him out of here!
Okay. Look, I'm not some crotcharian. I'm not some contrarian just saying that so you can go against the grain and get more views. I'm not some micro-dicked pissant trying to tell you that you're dumb wrong for having a different opinion than me. I'm just voicing my honest opinion. And my honest opinion is that Airazor kinda sucks. Now, if you watched my Kingdom Airazor review, provided you could hear me over Josuke Higashikata's theme, then you'd probably know that I broke my first copy of Kingdom Airazor less than 24 hours after I got it, and that's why I hate Kingdom Airazor. Well, you're wrong. That's only one of the reasons. Another reason is because the angles were ungodly loose right out of the box, and on top of that, I hate this brown. It looks like unhealthy poop. Oh, and don't excuse it because, oh, it's real world accurate, Wyan. Because to that I say, bullshit. They could have gone with a charcoal gray and it would have been both prettier as well as real world accurate and also cartoon accurate. But nope, we just had to be like, honey, the dog has diarrhea again. His feces have destroyed the loo. While we got, we might as well use that bird action figure you were talking about earlier. And while we're at it, let's use him to paint that bulkhead they're doing for Amazon. The whole color conundrum is a big part of the reason why, when it was time for me to do my best 22 figures of 2021, I chose Kingdom Skywarp over Kingdom Airazor. And all of that was despite the fact that I had literally bought an entire new copy of Airazor just to replace the broken one. Yeah, that's how much of a deal breaker colors can be for me personally. The colors are much better. The dark brown used here is very rich. It almost borders on mahogany, which is not only cartoon accurate, mostly, but also real world accurate? Oh my god! I mean, I am acutely aware that the only thing that's changed about the mold is the color scheme and the head, but I still like it more. And on its own terms, it's still a borderline perfect figure. Skywarp actually has a fascinating distinction out of my collection, as it's only one of 2 figures that I've ever created and printed upgrade kits for. The swords you're seeing now, designed by yours truly. And now that I've mentioned 3D printed upgrade kits, it's time to be a corporate shill for a moment, I'm afraid, as I talk about today's sponsor, Everform Productions. So what is Everform Productions? What the heck do they do? What do they have to do with Transformers? Everform Productions is a digital storefront on shapeways.com run jointly by me and my friend Masterfar. We design, test, and upload our models to Shapeways, you order them, and Shapeways will print them and send them straight to your house, or your P.O. box, or your college, or wherever you happen to get your mail from, you know. Were you one of the many who found Legacy Bulkhead's packing firearm utterly disappointing? Now you can have him pack some heat by ordering our white label minigun accessory. Because in Soviet Russia, you don't ask why the heavy is dead, the heavy asks why you aren't dead. Who left that in the script? Or perhaps you're more of a melee enthusiast. I know one fandom with quite a few of you. Maybe Kingdom Skywarp's swords tickled your fancy, but you don't have a Kingdom Skywarp to pair them with. Perfectly understandable. Maybe you even broke or lost a couple accessories. Perfectly understandable. I've been dealing with a broken accessory recently. Well, sulk no longer, because I'm certain you'll find more than suitable replacements here on our store. A lineup which includes what I feel to be some of my best work, such as the white label chainsaw and an accurate recreation of Kamen Rider Black RX's Revolcane. Now, just for the sake of legality, I should state that I'm not affiliated with Toei and I don't own the rights to Kamen Rider Black RX. I just designed this out of passion for the show. And I went to great lengths in order to make sure that it was as show accurate as possible. So now, when the Crisis Empire attacks, your Cybertronian karate bugmen won't be unarmed.
Look at that! You've been impaled!
And don't think we've forgotten about you, gamers. We've made a plethora of accessories specifically based off of some of your favorite titles, such as this, an accurate recreation of the Monado from Xenoblade Chronicles. But maybe RPGs aren't your thing. Maybe this whole Xenoblade thing is just a bit too niche for you, and you'd like something from a game that's more glory killer, less grindy filler. Then it may interest you to know that there is a mostly accurate recreation of the BFG 9000 from the Doom 2016 games. Not only is it sized well enough to put the B in BFG, but it's also got a trio of blast effect ports on the front. So even if you can't just shoot a hole into Mars, you can certainly feel like it with this powerful accessory in your figure's hands. So what are you waiting for? Go to the description, click the link to Everform Productions' Shapeways page, and purchase some of the coolest tools this side of Iacon. Also buy my Energon Cubes, available exclusively on eBay. And that helps segue back into talking about the figures themselves, because, quite frankly, the exclusives based off Kingdom Airazor actually fixed my 2 biggest issues with the mold, the wing durability and the colors. However, I feel what ultimately saved Kingdom Skywarp from falling into the same pit as Kingdom Airazor was me, because I had more awareness about the fragility issue and I knew to be more careful. It really had nothing to do with any changes to the mold or the materials. However, Terrorsaur has unintentionally fixed literally every single problem I had with the mold and then some. And so my critical analysis of this figure starts in beast mode, where I honestly don't know what to think of it. Like, within the pantheon of Transformers that have turned into beasts at the deluxe scale, I think this is a very strong showing. The sculpting on the beast mode is an excellent blend of reptilian rotophilism. God damn it, I'm turning into Dr. Spanko. Refocus, Ryan. You can do this. It's an excellent blend of reptilian photorealism and cartoon accuracy. However, as a general-purpose dinosaur toy, it really doesn't work. For starters, the extra chunky green salsa really isn't doing a lot to break up this red tortilla chip, if you get my drift. They are ultimately a bit too close together and also a bit too centralized along the figure in my opinion. It ends up making them feel purposeful and artificial as opposed to like naturally modeled skin or moss. And the reason I feel well within my right to criticize this particular element is because they've done it well before. Just look at Kingdom Grimlock. The black and white patches there are at least consistent and make me assume that they're at least camouflage for when he's like standing up against a group of rocks. Meanwhile, the only purpose they seem to serve on Terrorsaur is making the job of the editor harder when he needs to key out Thrust's screen and not Terrorsaur's green. Also, pro tip for anyone looking to get into YouTube, green screening is cool, but it's a nightmare, so keep that in mind.
Cat, I'm a kitty cat, and I dance, 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 and I dance, dance, dance. Cat, I'm a kitty cat, and I dance, 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 and I dance, dance, dance.
And while the top has its issues, unfortunately the front view has some issues of its own. The beast mode kinda looks like it has a beer gut. Granted, that's more from robot mode kibble and faux parts than it is from an excessive drinking problem, but it still looks kinda silly. And from here, we move away from actual problems and into just general nitpicks, like how the box art is lying to us. You cannot mount the laser gun underneath the pterodactyl mode. You cannot give him a laser penis. Probably a good choice though. Sorry to disappoint everyone who was looking forward to giving this guy a democracy manifest, but I'm afraid it's going to leave you feeling as though you have erectile dysfunction. God. Fun fact, that pun has actually been waiting around in me ever since I saw this KO back in 2019, so thank you, Democracy Manifestosaurus.
Gentlemen, this is Democracy Manifest.
Then we get to the legs, where visual cohesion is destroyed further by the purple pieces. These really shouldn't bother me as much as they do, especially since they're just the bottom of the robot mode legs. What do I care? Well, in design, there is a concept known as space and negative space. For those confused, space is basically the area that is occupied by an object, while negative space is the area that is not occupied by said object. For example, the area on the Kingdom Dinobot mold where the legs form part of the beast mode chest is clearly supposed to be negative space. You can see that it's clearly defined by the orange bits, or in the case of Grimlock, the bronze bits. However, I feel Grimlock does a better job of hiding this negative space because the bronze does a worse job of drawing your eye than the orange does. That's my biggest nitpick with this beast mode. Not only is it colored in a way that draws your eye to it, but in the most inopportune lighting conditions, it will look as though he doesn't even have legs. I guess you could always extend the legs so they're pointed upright and he stands proud and tall like the mighty Rodan, but most of the time...
Oh, yes.
It just looks uber cursed and silly. Trying to make Metaton jealous? Though if you don't mind pulling out the arms as well, it does make for a pretty dope Ridley fan mode. All we need is a Chozo statue and bam, we're ready to take on Lower Norfair. Or the Magmore Caverns. Sorry, still haven't played Metroid Prime yet. It's on my bucket list though. It would also be great to get a purple version as Beastor's Laserbeak 2 turn into Ridley, though I'm not gonna get my hopes up. And speaking of lists, that dovetails into everything I love about the figure. For starters, it's very much in line with the rest of Kingdom's very, very excellent dinosaur modes, and dinosaur skeleton modes. There isn't a wrinkle or scale here that doesn't make the figure feel textured to a degree that I don't feel any other Transformer figure ever has. Even my weirdly tactile darling Gigawatt fails to stand up to just how textured the guy feels. It's a sensory symphony. And while the robot mode chest should hurt cohesion, I actually find that it does the opposite. It actually improves on the cohesion of the original. While yes, it could technically be said that he'd be best described as thick with 2 C's, a K, Q, and 3 R's, I don't actually mind all that much. Furthermore, in terms of sculpting, the head mode has so much more personality than Airazor's. Then again, that may just be because they painted in pupils instead of leaving them as black soulless voids. And the little hanging offy fangs on the side really remind me of an Oni mask. And while I did deride the green spots for not being natural enough, I do think that they pop hard against the red flesh of this beast. And while one could argue that Airazor just has a more cohesive beast mode, no, I don't think so. It's got a lot more color breakup between every single angle. Like, look at it from the front, bird in a safety vest. Now look at it from the back, bird in Daisy Dukes. Now look at it from underneath, bird in, I guess, kinky bondage equipment? I don't know. Whatever. It just looks more broken up than Terrorsaur does from every single angle. And unlike Terrorsaur, the chest has a horrendously hollow Horus hole. And my biggest problem? The wings? Those have been fixed to hell and back. Several times over, in fact. The plastic here feels softer, but the wings themselves feel more durable. It honestly makes me way more confident in posing the figure.
In beast mode, Terrorsaur's head is on a hinge that allows him to look up and down, a peg that allows for a head swivel, and a beak that opens and closes. The neck can also be raised and lowered for a greater range of expression. Each wing contains a series of 5 separate hinges, 4 of which facilitate vertical movement while the 5th adjusts the wingspan. However, the 3rd joint from the shoulder should not be bent upwards due to a tab that locks the wings in place for robot mode. Lest you fail to take Byte's original Airazor as a warning, the robot mode knees can be extended, and the legs can be bent backwards for flying poses. Lastly, the feet are attached to a ball joint with a greater degree of backwards movement when compared to forward and sideways pivots.
Also, while I didn't put it down in Maya's portion of the script, the butt can actually raise up and down. I don't know what you'd use it for. I'm not going to use it to make Terrorsaur's twerk shop, but I will use it to put the mental image of a pterodactyl twerking into your brain forever. Here's Buzzworthy Terrorsaur next to my last review, Legacy Bulkhead, my other deluxe pterodactyl, Kingdom Wingfinger, my latest exclusive in my collection, the Lossatron Speedia 500 Override, my first Target exclusive, Earthrise Thrust, my latest Target exclusive, aside from Terrorsaur, Buzzworthy Silver Streak, another Fembot that I purchased during this episode's production, Studio Series Bumblebee RC, a Beast Wars figure that I think is also better than Kingdom Airazor's Transmetal 2 Prowl, and of course a standard Kutama standard can of Sparkling Water and Broadside. Honestly, up until now, I don't think I've ever run across a more love it or hate it type figure. But honestly, I'm falling on the side of loving this figure, even though it looks like a ketchup-coated Batarang. And so here we have Terrorsaur in robot mode, and it's a mostly accurate recreation of his Beast Wars cartoon model with some minor annoyances. I'll get those out of the way just so I don't have to focus on them for too long. The first issue people may take with this figure is that the transformation back into Beast mode isn't as clicky as it was on Airazor. It feels less satisfying somewhat, but only marginally so for me. I wasn't the biggest fan of Airazor's transformation to begin with, not saying it was bad by any means, but I didn't think it was that satisfying. The most satisfying part was the legs, and that's the only part that they've made different, really. The only other real change is the fact that the robot mode and beast mode head are no longer attached on the same rotation when they transform, which is appropriate considering that, well, the chest isn't where Terrorsaur's beast mode ends up when he transforms. However, those are only issues with the transformation, not the actual robot mode, so let's get into that. For starters, the eagle-eyed viewers may have noticed in beast mode that his famous forearm fins were chilling out on the back of the beast mode legs, and that's because, well, they're parts-forming pieces. Second, while the robot does technically have better color breakup than the beast mode, unfortunately, the backpack occasionally makes it feel like it has worse color breakup. Like, from the right angles and the right lighting, it does all look very distinct and none of it blurs together, but in the wrong lighting conditions and with the wrong poses and the wrong camera even, it just fails. Then we find out that actually the box art lied twice. You can't even mount a laser blast effect onto the gun. And honestly, that raises a good point. If the blast effects are so important, why are they so inconsistently applied in terms of compatibility with other figures? And I'm sure there's definitely some explanation out there that sounds totally illogical to someone like me who doesn't know anything about toy budgets or the like, but honestly, they managed to do this on toys that came out before, like, there were even blast effects, so what gives? Why is something like Drag Strip totally incompatible with them? Where's your excuse, Blaster? And if Airazor's so good, where are her? Oh god, I've pulled that card too many times, haven't I? Next up, why is the faction badge smaller than some of these modeled scales on the torso plate? Seriously, he's supposed to be a Predacon, and like, I don't think that the Maximals and Predacons were as concerned with being in disguise on prehistoric Earth as the Autobots and Decepticons were. And then we get to the silliest issue with the figure. Oh boy, just, I don't know how to describe it. You should see it, but if you can't, here's some stop motion to make it clear. Yup, because of the way that the chest piece is sculpted, it makes him look as though he's, packed quite the bratwurst for lunch, we'll say. It's like the dance number for Dance Magic Dance in Labyrinth. You might not notice David Bowie's unfortunately tight pants at first, but when you do, you can't unsee it. However, much like that scene, it really isn't visible from most angles, and you really have to look for it. In fact, I kind of feel bad about making dick jokes about this problem in the first place because it's kind of a non-issue. For starters, the only thing that isn't cartoon accurate here is the color scheme. Apart from that, the sculpt is perfectly on model to the show. For two, not only is the head very accurate to the cartoon, but it actually has a smirk on it, which is a pretty weird thing among modern Chug figures. Like, where is the personality in everyone? I don't see it very often, and it's so refreshing. And also, the weapon is extremely cartoon accurate, without being horrendously oversized or thinner than a pepperoni pizza. And when these three elements come together, they perfectly capture what made Terrorsaur such a joy in Beast Wars. He's the traitorous Starscream of the group, unless you count, I guess, Dinobot as the Armada Starscream of the group. He would definitely try to shoot Megatron in the back of the head or stab him in the neck any chance he got, until Scorponok inevitably tackles him, and then Megatron just scolds him, I guess, until he inevitably allows both him and Scorponok to die in lava. Megatron! Megatron! Over here, Megatron! Over here, Lord Megatron! 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 Of all the bozos I could have died next to, it just had to be you, Scorponok. Christ. And while I did make fun of the forearm fins for being parts-forming pieces, I do think that was ultimately the right call. First of all, if they had to be attached permanently, they'd have to be way smaller and kinda lame. On top of that, you can actually turn them around since they're not attached permanently, and they can serve as melee weapons. Like, imagine Terrorsaur using these to catch and disarm his opponent. And if one of those fins actually manages to hit you with how sharp they look, well, better say bye-bye to life. And if you don't think that those fins are effective as weapons, you clearly haven't seen Amazon Riders. This is your obligatory violence warning. 3, 2, 1, and...
Fatality.
And shit like this is why I'm totally inappropriate for kids. Though speaking of Kamen Rider, that's actually a good segue into me talking about what I think this figure reminds me of on a personal level, because it kind of feels very reminiscent of one of my other passions, Tokusatsu. However, it feels a bit less Go-Go 5 and a bit more Q-Ranger, if you catch my drift. That is to say, it does have a similar spandexy undersuity vibe, but it also feels as though there's armor placed on top of that spandex undersuit. It comes through in the way that the purple spreads over the shins like it's boots or armored greaves of some kind, and makes it all the way up to the legs where you get these red plates that just feel like thigh armor. And also the crotch starts to transition into that whole undersuit idea with like how black it is and like how much of it covers the figure. And then we get up to the head where it's like purple for a helmet or whatever. even the head sculpt feels kind of early Heisei, I guess. It definitely reminds me of Prince Olympius from Power Rangers Lightspeed Rescue, and the headband even feels a bit Ultraman-esque. Or way big-esque if you're uncultured and only know Ben 10. Seriously doubt Terrorsaur would be that chill with the Spacium beam, though.
Skip it up and down.
Hell, I think the backpack even helps sell the illusion, since it kinda looks like a pair of capes that would unfurl into terrible CGI wings so the hero and the villain could have a bad CGI battle. Not trying to dunk on Ryder's CGI, by the way. It still can be incredibly badass despite its quality, but look at it. It's silly as hell. His build also feels far more Rider-like than superhero-like, where it's all lean muscle instead of bulging muscle. And the final area where Terrorsaur ends up improving on Airazor? The weapon storage. Instead of just lazily tabbing into the thighs, though you can still do that if you want him to draw it out like a pistol, you can actually tab it into the backpack, and that's some pretty good weapon storage if I do say so. There is, of course, one final area where it could have made improvements over Airazor, that being the articulation, but it didn't really need to make improvements. So without further ado...
In robot mode, Terrorsaur's head is on a ball joint, his shoulders are on universal joints, his elbows bend over 90 degrees, and his wrists bent. The waist rotates and the butt flap raises for backwards movement. His hips are on universal joints, and legs rotate above the knee. The lowest portion can bend forwards, and the feet again can pivot backwards more than they can forwards.
Unfortunately, I have to make a confession. I did have to make some modifications to the figure's joints in order to make sure the articulation was as good as physically possible. And that's because this figure carried over two of the most annoying problems of Airazor. First off, the bit that forms the legs in beast mode that allows them to swing back, that was loose. Same with the ankles. Fortunately, there's a handy-dandy little solution to this problem that involves a piece of dental floss and some super glue. All you need to do is get a little dollop of super glue onto the dental floss, then shove the floss straight into the joint in question that you can't reach on your own, and just rub it back and forth. Then, once you've gotten the glue inside, make sure that you start working the joint back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, so it doesn't lock up. And in the case of super gluing the ball joints, just take them apart and then place the super glue on them. It's that easy! And while I have spent a great deal of this review bagging on Airazor, I will give her one credit over this figure. She hasn't been an exclusive twice over. The Buzzworthy release is exclusive to Target, and the cartoon-accurate release is exclusive to Amazon, which kinda stinks if you live outside the States. And believe me, I have more than a few frustrations with this whole exclusivity thing, and I'll get to that rant in due time. There's just another figure that I think would be better suited for this rant. But for now, all you need to know is that I think the retailer they chose in this case was alright, and the only other area where they didn't need to improve but did anyway was on the height. So here's Buzzworthy Terrorsaur next to Bulkhead, Wingfinger, Override, Thrust, Silver Streak, RC, Prowl, a standard Qtama, standard can of sparkling water, and Broadside. And with all of that said, do I really even need to give you any more details about why I think this is a brilliant figure and superior to its pre-tool form? Well, I don't think I should, but for the sake of concluding this dumpster fire of a review, I will. I enjoy it way more than Airazor. I don't think it's objectively better. In fact, if I was rating it objectively, I'd say it's actually a 6 out of 10 compared to Airazor's, I believe it's 7.5 out of 10. However, for me personally, this figure is closer to a 9 out of 10 because I just enjoy it more. This figure has sturdier wings in beast mode, which was one of my biggest gripes with the Kingdom Airazor, as you all probably remember. It broke less than 24 hours after I got the first copy of it. Then, as far as cohesion goes, I feel the beast mode is more cohesive than Airazor because of the second chest plate, and while I do feel as though the transformation has sacrificed a bit of its satisfaction because it's removed a bit of clickiness from it, the transformation is only 1/3 of the full package. And with the robot mode, while I don't think it's 100% perfect, it does give me what I want out of a Transformer. A head sculpt that actually expresses the personality. So, for all of that, I'm more than happy with this figure. Granted, I would have liked to have gotten the cartoon accurate deco, but let's be real, that ain't happening! So, with all that out of the way, thanks for watching this video. Please remember to like it, share it, and subscribe to the channel if you want to see more. And this is Firebite27, over and out. See you next time!